Hey guys, today might sound a little different because somebody forgot to plug the microphone in. See, what happened was I had recorded a few episodes of 5 Good News Stories. That's the other podcast I do, and then unplugged the mic to edit those, and I forgot to plug it back in. So it's not like I didn't do a mic check this morning. I just forgot to plug it back in. So I put some EQ on this. It should sound okay enough, but that's what happened.
The Shark Deck.
Howdy, I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. You know that Seinfeld something that Jerry Seinfeld said, quote, something is going to happen? Julia Louis-Dreyfus doesn't know anything about it. She told The Guardian, yeah, I just saw that news last night and I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Some suspect she's being coy. Others suspect she doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. We'll see. John Mulaney was on Stephen Colbert last week. One story that seems to be tickling the fancy of the media. Mulaney was hanging out with Olivia Munn's mother. They were watching Korean movies together. Olivia herself is less interested in such movies. John said she once found a notepad I had with a list of Korean movies that I had read good things about to watch with Miss Kim, and she said, this is more effort than you put into any of our date nights. As Mulaney tells the story, one night they started watching a movie called The Handmaiden together. Unaware that the film is a lesbian erotic thriller, Mulaney said, I was like, truly, this is what people mean by erotic. There's a very intense, and I can't say more about it, very intense. They're right against each other, very serious, very physical. Olivia's mom looks over to me and goes, I think they're a little lesbian. What do you think? I watched some comedy specials. I started with Joe Pera. I love Joe Pera. I've seen Joe Pera 20 years ago. John, we hear the butt coming. Yeah. I feel bad. His material deserves so much better. So what's the issue, John? The audience is out in front of him. If you're not familiar with Joe Pera, deliberately low energy, deliberately very matter-of-fact, dry. And when I first saw him way back, it was just amazing because it was so anti-everything that you're used to. But if you watch Joe Pera's special on YouTube, the audience is out in front of it. They know they're at a Joe Pera show and they know what Joe's going to do. So when he starts to do it, they overreact. And it took me out of it. The material is strong, but the crowd ruined the show. And I'll tell you a story about Mitch Hedberg. His wife, Lynn Shawcroft, told me. I've told the story before, but I'll tell it really quickly. About a year after Mitch died, I reached out to Lynn and told her we wanted to do a tribute on Sirius XM. And I didn't reach out right away. I didn't want to be a vulture like, oh, comedian died, let's do it. So I gave it some time and I reached out to her. She was really touched. And she came in and she had shared with me Mitch had a notebook of some jokes that he'd written down but never performed. In the special that we did, we actually had some comedians like Doug Stanhope do those jokes. I bet nobody has saved the tapes. I haven't worked there in 10 years. Talked to them. But she also had with her a club recording from late in Mitch's life, and she was playing it for me, and I'm listening to it, and I said, you know you have an album here. And she was a little reluctant, but she took it to Comedy Central and a guy named Jack Vaughn that I know pretty well, and that became the posthumous Mitch Hedberg album. Anyway, she was explaining to me, if you heard the raw tape, Mitch, late in life, was speeding up his act because the same thing, the audience was getting in front of him and it was throwing him a little bit. So his delivery had picked up and it wasn't quite the same. But again, that was because of the crowd. So Joe Pera, I don't know, maybe you'll really dig it. I think the material was really good, but the crowd kind of took me out of it. So I switched over to Netflix and Beth Stelling's If You Didn't Want Me Then. I like Beth a lot. She's been on my radar for a long time. And I explain this sometimes. This was my challenge with the Mulaney special. I felt like she was reciting a monologue. I get that people aren't going up and winging their 1-hour specials, but there's something in the presentation where I feel like Dave Chappelle's on a surfboard and feeling the crowd and changing his pace. I felt like Mulaney was telling stories that he had just really, really, really rehearsed. And I felt the same thing with Beth, and I couldn't get into it. And as I listen to it, and my ears are sensitive to this thing, I suspect maybe, perhaps, not accusing anybody, John, you're probably wrong. Why would you say such a thing? Maybe, possibly, they sweeten the audience. The audience is laughing at her segues. It just sounds unnatural to me. Go hit play on that and just don't listen to Beth. Listen to the crowd. The crowd seems unnatural. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Then I tried one more. Zarna Garg's 1 in a Billion. You'll find that on Amazon. I found her really charming. I want to love her. But I feel like she's got a great 8 minutes and not an hour. There's probably a fantastic 8 minutes in there. So that was John watching comedy. 0 for 3. Sorry, everybody, I try. If you're watching ABC last night, Disney released a new animated short celebrating the 100th anniversary of Walt Disney Animation Studios that features Mickey and Minnie Mouse gathering up hundreds of characters from throughout the history of Disney's cartoons. This is called Once Upon a Studio. One of those characters, the genie from Aladdin, and that had, quote, new, meaning never before heard, dialogue from Robin Williams. Relax, don't freak out. Now, you may recall, Robin Williams supposedly had a line in his will preventing Disney from reusing outtakes from the Aladdin recording sessions. Disney has gone out of its way to confirm that it got permission from Robin Williams' estate in order to do this. They're trying to get in front of any rumors that they used AI. Producer Yvette Marino told Polygon it was, quote, so important to Disney to have Robin Williams' team involved from early on, saying it meant the world that they said yes to his inclusion. One of the producers, Dan Abraham, said the genie was too important to not be included. I just think we couldn't have made this short without Cinderella. We couldn't have made this short without Stitch. Couldn't have made it without Robin Hood. And we couldn't have made it without the genie. He's just such a part of our history, our legacy. Some are pointing out the voice actors for Cinderella and Robin Hood are also dead, presumably many others. And Disney being Disney, they did this thing. And who knows? We'll see how people react to that. Biran Posehn talked to the Toledo Blade about music. The first band Posehn got into as a kid was Kiss. And he told a story about one Christmas morning when he was gifted a record. That record, Sean Cassidy. Brian said, my cousin got Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, and I got Sean Cassidy. I returned my Sean Cassidy to the store for either Led Zeppelin 2 or Led Zeppelin 4. You wouldn't consider it metal, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. From there, I got AC/DC's Highway to Hell album, and then I got into Metallica, Raven, and bands like that. Reggie Watts is all about Montana, which is good because he was speaking to the Montana Free Press. Reggie has a new book out today. It's called Great Falls, Montana, Fast Times, Post-Punk Weirdos, and a Tale of Coming Home Again. The book documents his youth in Electric City. Reggie said, for the most part, I just went back and tried to remember as much as I could. I got to ask friends about stories and corroborate things that happened. And I interviewed my mom. I got to revisit eras of time that I forgot about and look at photographs from those times. It was a cool adventure and re-experiencing. If I could, I'd work with artificial intelligence and give it general times when these things happen and then have the AI do investigations to find the exact times and correlate those things. I'd love to fill out my timeline and create essentially a cybernetic memory of my life. The Montana Free Press asked, did anything about writing the book surprise you? Reggie said, I'm surprised that I finished it. When you're working in a new medium and you finally finish something in it, it feels slightly underwhelming, but also slightly unbelievable. It's such a long process. It's not like finishing a song. It's not like you put the period on the last sentence and you're like, yes. One more question from the Free Press. When you perform in Montana, does it feel different? And Reggie said, I try not to get too political. The last time I was in Great Falls, I talked about gun rights. I was trying to talk about a sensible gun safety measure and how they're actually in favor of people who are pro-Second Amendment because they create more of a responsible populace with firearms. Surprisingly, people were chill about it. There's a lot to be said for when they hear it from somebody from their own state, even if I don't necessarily look like most people there. And even though I live in Hollywood and they could say, you've been infiltrated by Hollywood, I don't really get a lot of that, and I'm pretty grateful for that. M Live had fun at Fred Armisen's show, which is called Comedy for Musicians, but everyone is welcome. M Live says Fred drew laughs while teaching the crowd how to gradually sneak out of a concert. The show lasted about 2 hours. Armisen's set divided into 2 acts. Detroit comedian Jake Russell performed in between. At one point, Fred got the entire crowd singing along to a song called Tandy Leather, which he made up based on some words on an article of clothing worn by an audience member. Armisen also performed Hey Policeman as Ian Rubbish, a British punk rocker alter ego, and did a parody of the Talking Heads called This Is My Street, before ending with a bad on purpose rendition of the Beatles' Blackbird, which he said his dad taught him on an old beat-up guitar. One way you can support the show is you can go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. Yvonne did just that. Yvonne availed herself of what I call the $10 donation, which is a $10 donation. So it was good timing for me. I was cold yesterday morning, and I was like, I might need 2 coffees here. I, of course, got my iced coffee, which is down here in the studio with me. Thank you, Yvonne. Nice little melt. It's about 55% of that one left. But I started off the morning with a hot coffee, which warmed me up nicely. So, Yvonne, thank you. And Yvonne's part of the Facebook group. I encourage everyone who listens, please join us in the Facebook group, Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. Just this morning, I posted something about Atsuko Akatsuka and also a Tom Papa thing. So you'll find those in there. Yvonne, thank you very much. Buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. The Daily Show announced their guest host, Michael Costa, is hosting this week. Next week, Jesus Nice. Then Charlemagne the God, week of the 30th. Sarah Silverman back for a second round on November 6th. That's interesting. Leslie Jones back for a second round on the 13th. Week of November 20th, The Daily Show News Team Takeover featuring Dulce Sloan, Ronnie Chang, and more. And week of November 27th, Michelle Wolf. Now, looking at that list, they don't have a host. I don't see them giving it to Michael Costa. Jesus Nice would be great. Maybe put him in the mix. Charlemagne is too popular. He won't step down to do The Daily Show. Sarah Silverman, I guess. Is she too old for the demo now? How old is Sarah? Sarah's 52. Maybe. Leslie Jones, maybe. Michelle Wolf might be the most likely candidate on the board right now. I think she'd be fantastic at it. We will see. Rick and Morty are back. Well, they have new voices. Justin Roiland out. Rick and Morty announced the new voices. They are Ian Cardoni and Harry Belden. Yeah, I don't know either. But the Hollywood Reporter spoke to showrunner Scott Martyr and creator Dan Harmon. Martyr said, "We heard thousands of people. Went on for 6 months. It was really wide. It almost went so wide that we debated doing a global hotline that we knew it would wind up being a prank line. We felt like we needed to go that far and wide. It was harder than we thought. I thought it'd be easier. Rick was a lot harder than expected. Everybody sounded like Macho Man Randy Savage or like a cousin of his. No one sounded exactly like Rick. It was tricky. People had it in splashes, but once you bring them in, they couldn't do it conversationally." I think Harmon really explains this well here. He says, "It's one thing to match an impression. Can you do George W. Bush as well as Dana Carvey? But can you do it beyond just saying not going to do it?" I think that is a great point. Harmon said, "I was trying to strike this crazy balance. This character has to be angry, sad, despondent, and all those things. I was removed from it until the late stages, and part of that was a selfish emotional conflict on my part, but it ended up helping us because of the scientific practicality of the process. It was very difficult, even in my short time at the end of the assembly line, where your ears very quickly get so confused when you're trying to tell the difference between a 9.5 and a 9.7 on a 'does this sound like my friend' scale. You so quickly lose your objectivity. I got to be a little baby and do even less work than Scott, but I can't stress enough that this is the job he signed up for." So they asked about Solar Opposites, where Justin Roiland also was the main voice, and they recast that and totally changed it into a British-sounding dude with Dan Stevens. Didn't work for me. And focus group of 2, Cousin Keith, didn't work for Cousin Keith either. And we love Solar Opposites, but the new season, I didn't even finish it. Just didn't work. Martyr said, "We never sincerely went down that road of redoing the voices. It was explored right at the heart of things at the very beginning. I always try to look from a fan's perspective. Imagine Homer Simpson sounding different. I would have been instantly out. As much as I love the show, I felt like it needed to be exactly the same." Yes, I think if you changed Homer Simpson's voice now, absolutely. But Mr. Martyr, go watch season 1 of The Simpsons and pay attention to Homer's voice there. Vulture did their 25 comedians you should know. One you should know is Stavros Halkias. Good call by them. He told Vulture, "When I was between like 5 and 8, my mom worked at a Greek restaurant on Saturday nights, and if I was lucky, she'd bring home tins of leftover calamari and lamb chops. Without my mom there to monitor what I was watching, I spent some of my most formative Saturday nights watching SNL and waiting to eat fried foods after midnight. Because of those nights, I idolized Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, and Will Ferrell and became a huge comedy nerd. And then, for most of the Saturday nights the last 15 years, I've attempted to recreate that pattern. The only difference is I do the comedy now, and the women I'm trying to hang out with at 1 a.m. are not my mother. The fried food is the same, though. That's great." Worst show ever, he said. "This takes place during Obama's first term. I was hosting an open mic at a seafood restaurant to make a little money. I was good friends with the owner, and he offered me $200 to do comedy in the corner of the bar for 4 hours. I explained, stand-up doesn't work that way, but for $200 I could put on a show for 2 hours. I need a room, a stage, a spotlight, and a microphone." He agreed. I showed up a week later. He wasn't there, and no one had heard a show was supposed to be taking place. There was no stage, no spotlight, but there was a wireless mic. I really needed the $200, so I took the mic and attempted to host a show in a packed bar with nowhere to stand. Most of the comics opted to walk around the huge circular bar. Everyone was bombing, and the night ended 40 minutes early when a local man named Ice Pick Rick decided to use his allotted 5 minutes to stab a comedian. What? Heather McMahon has a new special on Netflix today. It is called Heather McMahon, Son I Never Had. Shot in Lexington, Kentucky at the historic Lexington Opera House. McMahon tackles body image, drugs, sex, fertility, grief, and lets loose on female beauty standards. If you're hitting the bookstore today, Reggie Watts' new book is out. I already told you about that. Also out, Aida Rodriguez's Legitimate Kid. We learn how Rodriguez turned trauma and pain, multiple kidnappings, a terrible marriage, and an unstable housing situation into comedy and connection. Suzanne Summers passed away Sunday at age 76. If you're of a certain age like me, you remember her fondly from Three's Company. Her publicist said she survived an aggressive form of breast cancer for over 23 years. Suzanne was surrounded by her loving husband, Alan, her son, Bruce, and her immediate family. Her family was gathered to celebrate her 77th birthday, which would have been yesterday. Instead, they will celebrate her extraordinary life and want to thank her millions of fans and followers who loved her dearly. And that's your comedy news today. You can follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. See you tomorrow.